Good morning and welcome to our Oracle EDM, Your Bridge to Tomorrow webcast. This is part of our Thought Leadership webcast series, and today's session is sponsored by Oracle and PwC. My name is David Handy. I'm the Vice President of Oracle Enterprise Data Management for North America, and joining me on the call today is Chris DeBeer from PwC. Hi, everybody. We'll go ahead and kick things off. This session is being recorded, and we will be posting that recording for those of you who may tune in late, or if you have colleagues that aren't able to join us. Couple of housekeeping things. If you can use the Q&A session, we have Karen Belmont from Oracle and some other folks monitoring the Q&A. Some of those questions we'll handle live. Others, Karen will answer as they come in. But we prefer you use the Q&A over the chat just because it gives us a little more control over the questions and being able to handle some of them live. So with that, let's kick off the session. And I think everybody will enjoy the content that we have to cover today. Great. Again, welcome everybody. Just as a reminder, and for those who have joined since we kicked it off, my name is David Handy. I'm the Vice President of Enterprise Data Management and Fusion Analytics Data Warehouse here at Oracle. And I'll be doing the first few minutes of our presentation today, and Chris DeBeer with PwC will be following up after that. So let's jump into it. You know, I believe that a data-first strategy is critical for modern enterprises to grow and thrive in this new normal of constant change. I mean, we've seen this over the past few years that business is just changing all the time. We're either adapting to changes in the economy, you know, back in 2008, significant shifts in the economy, or we're adapting to competitive changes as more global competitors come onto the stage, or we're adapting to other types of black swan events like the coronavirus, but change is constant. And we believe that a data-first strategy is the foundation that enables organizations to be nimble and change quickly. If you don't know what's going on in your business and you can't govern that change, then you can't change. Simply put, as Ovum said a few years ago, that if your business critical data is a mess, nothing else really matters. Now, 77%, what is 77%? Well, 77% is the number of companies that have cited data-related issues causing delays. I believe that number is actually larger than that. I think a lot of data-related delays go unreported because people just handle them as an everyday part of their job. But it's a productivity killer. You know, when you have to take time out of your day to reformat your data or to fix a data issue that causes a report in one part of the organization not to agree with a report in another part of the organization, or to find out why, those are productivity killers. That is time that cannot be spent doing the things which enable your organization to change and grow and thrive. And what's interesting is a lot of organizations will say, well, my data is fine. And a lot of that depends on what type of data you're talking about. You know, in an enterprise, there's two kinds of data. There's regular transactional data, which everybody recognizes. It's an order, it's a PO, it's a time card entry, you know, it's a lead. You know, whatever part of the business you're in, it's one of those types of objects. And that kind of data actually doesn't change all that often. It may evolve, but it doesn't change all that often. What really kills you is the data you don't realize is behind the scenes governing all of the transactional data, and that's your metadata. So what is metadata? Well, metadata is the blueprint for your enterprise. It defines how your organization functions, how it reports, how it executes, and it's constantly changing because your organization is changing. New cost centers are being created, new report roll-ups are being created, new ways of looking at your business are being created, new product lines, new product offerings, new bundlings, all across the organization. You know, new sales territories, new distributor networks, new distributors. All of that information is changing constantly, and it's what defines your business. And here's why it kills you if you don't have that data in order. Metadata is everywhere, right? It affects all parts of your business. And you know, whether you're on the finance side of the house or on the sales and back office side of the house, or operations, or in the analytical side, it doesn't matter. Metadata is everywhere. And if it is not properly governed, a change to metadata in one part of the organization can have dramatic effects on another. You know, I had a customer that used P cards for their employees in the field to buy things. A lot of organizations do that. They give out an American Express or a company card. And the problem they had is that somebody in finance would change their cost center structures to handle a finance issue, and it would break the P cards. As that change moved throughout the organization, the P cards, cost centers that the P cards build to would no longer be mapped properly, and the P cards would automatically shut off. And so people would be out doing their business, and all of a sudden their P cards wouldn't work. And it was because they didn't have a good governance process that made sure that when finance made that change, the procurement was not only aware of the change, but able to make any changes they needed to make. That's the real challenge that organization has. And you really end up with a death by 1,000 cuts. You know, rarely do you see organizations just, I mean, you do see it, but they don't tunnel all at once due to data issues. It really is a death by 1,000 cuts, or you might say inefficiencies by 1,000 cuts. Small little data issues constantly slowing down and dragging down your productivity. And why? Because most organizations have a metadata change process similar to what you see on the screen. It's a siloed manual process where somebody somewhere needs to initiate the change. They call somebody over in IT, a spreadsheet is sent out, they model their change, the spreadsheet's sent to a couple of people, it gets approved, it gets pushed into one of the functional areas. And functional areas, they can be all in the same system, you know, in a unified Cloud ERP like Oracle's, or they can be in multiple disparate systems. And in many organizations, you have a combination of both. It really doesn't matter. If all of the data is in the same system, what happens to you is a change in one area propagates immediately to other areas. And that causes things to break right away. If you have siloed systems, then those changes don't propagate for some period of time while the refresh cycles happen, and then it breaks things. But the bottom line is the process, you may have automated systems or unified systems, but you can't ensure that the metadata is synchronized without having a good, solid governance process in place. So what is 20.5? 20.5 is the number of man days that companies use to reconcile metadata issues and changes. It's a lot of time. And in a little bit, I'm going to show you how one of our customers actually measured it and put a number to it. And it really is quite revealing. But as I said earlier, the point is that these data changes, these issues with your metadata, they're not good. The reason that organizations aren't running around saying, I got a big problem, is that the problem is spread out across the entire organization. Every department has somebody or multiple people that track down and fix these data issues every single day. So this is what one customer who used a manual spreadsheet-based process to manage the changes within their metadata. This is what they found. And this was in a process. They measured the process as if there was no errors. And we all know that when you use spreadsheets, I think the last number I saw was 99% of all spreadsheets have at least one error in them. But we all know that spreadsheets are an error-prone way to do this. But they found that their manual traditional process that they'd been using for years and that worked took twice as long, 4 hours and 50 minutes to make one change to enterprise data or metadata. And then after they put enterprise data management in place to automate that management, the governance, the routing, the adding the collaboration that you need when these changes have effects across the organization, they were able to cut that in half to 2 hours from beginning to end. But what they pointed out when we were reviewing this with them was rarely did they ever see a process go through, in the 4 hours and 50 minutes, almost 5 hours that they managed or that they measured. Rarely did they see one of those processes happen without errors, and errors cause the process to start over. So quite often they'd be 2 or 3x what they were seeing here. So there are real gains in your flexibility or agility and allowing people to get back to doing the innovative parts of their job, as opposed to chasing down data issues. Now, how do we do this? Well, many of you have heard about MDM, master data management. That was one way in the past that we would address these issues. Enterprise data management is a new way of approaching this. Oracle was the leader in master data management for decades. We had more master data management customers live than all of our competitors combined. And we learned a lot from those years. Our dominance in that space started after we bought PeopleSoft and Siebel and BEA, and we had brought all of these technologies together. And obviously, when you do that, you have a metadata problem. Well, two things happened. First, we learned that although customers, and even today, they still have a master data need, that the way we used to do it was error prone. The implementations were long and difficult. And by the time a lot of times when you got them implemented, by then things had changed so much that you had to start over, because the traditional MDM process was a top-down process. You got everybody in a room, they all had to agree on how your data was going to be structured. And then you would start implementing a system to manage that. And then of course, they changed. How data needed to be structured changed, or finance needed to change something, but engineering that would have an adverse effect on them. And so governing by committee was very, very difficult and very, very inefficient. And when we moved to the cloud, we realized and came up with a consolidated ERP set of applications, ERP, CX, HCM, and supply chain, that, mastering the data is really kind of the easy part, right? The hard part is how do you manage the governance, which Chris is going to spend some time talking about. And we introduced enterprise data management, which is a bottom-up approach to this problem. So finance can start governing and managing their data. And when it's right, they can open up the doors and allow procurement and engineering and other departments to share, to see those changes and be part of the approval processes. And then eventually they can evolve to a full enterprise-wide data governance process. You don't have to build the process from scratch up front. You can build it in the various departments and then involve each other and make the small changes that need to happen as the business changes and evolves to move towards an enterprise data governance process. And that's what enterprise data management is meant to do and what it does. So we look at it as a proactive way of managing your enterprise data. And a typical process looks like this. And again, these bubbles, generally those are functional areas within a company. They may represent different systems, or they may represent all one system. It doesn't matter. We can visualize it, validate it, make comparisons, rationalize it, plan, do what ifs, collaboratively decide what our changes need to be in a very organized and managed way. So another company that we work with, they also did an analysis of their old processes versus their new processes post EDM implementation. And again, they saw the same sorts of gains as that first one. They actually had systems in place to do this. They had some homegrown systems, but they saw a 50% improvement in staff productivity and an 87% reduction in manual data management processes. That's the whole point, right? That is the whole point right there. 75% improvement in reporting productivity. Just the numbers are staggering. And I think the most important one is a 90% improvement in your velocity to integrate and bring new environments and new functionality on board. There's a lot of changes that organizations that drive. There's a lot of reasons that organizations are driven to make a change to governing their data. I group them into two functional areas. There's the stuff above the line, which I call transformational change. You're evaluating new ERPs. You're looking to upgrade from an older version to a newer version. You might have a corporate reorganization. You may have multiple ERPs because you've grown through mergers and acquisitions that you need to get to work together better. Those are big transformational changes. And having a foundation, what I call a data first foundation built into those transformations is critical. And enterprise data management is the solution that allows you to achieve a data first strategy where your data is again viewed as the foundation and it's ready as you make these changes. But the real money, okay, the real money is in the routine data changes. That's where the big productivity gains come in. Yes, if you're doing a chart of accounts redesign, doing it in an environment like enterprise data management will make it go much faster, much easier, much cleaner with fewer mistakes. No question about it. I have 1,000 customers doing that all the time. But that's kind of a one and done. You do that every few years, right? When you have a transformational reason to do it. But it's the day-to-day routine changes of that chart of accounts is where you get the big bang for your buck. You need to create a new department. You have a new geographic region, new legal entity, a new regulation that you need to track, new projects. All of those things affect your metadata, and having a place to do that quickly, efficiently, and involve everybody that needs to be involved, it makes all the difference. So that is what we see enterprise data management. That's what it does for organizations. What I'd like to do now is to turn the time over to Chris to jump in and talk about the practical aspects of adopting a data first strategy and moving into automating and improving this portion of your business. Chris, I'll turn the time over to you.
Thanks, David. Appreciate the introduction here, and then the level setting for the group. If we can go to the next slide. So I want to level set a little bit on the way that we see the value of enterprise data management and what it is. And this is an important distinction. So Oracle EDM maps, manages, and synchronizes records, relationships, and properties of hierarchies across systems. I'll say that again. Oracle EDM maps, manages, and synchronizes records, relationships, and properties of hierarchies across systems. What that means is that I can have a hierarchy in system A, and Oracle EDM helps keep system B, which has the exact same hierarchy, to make sure that I have one version of the truth. And for system C, that doesn't include that last child 3 there that you see, it has a different view. I can manage that as well, so that I get the referential integrity, if you will, across those systems. The other key thing to know here, right? Not only that it synchronizes, maps, and manages it, but it keeps a record of the relationships. What's the parent-child, the property. So if system C requires a different attribute than system A or B, I can code that, and I have a centralized place to manage that in advance, proactively, as David said, across systems. So the other thing that EDM that's really important to notice is that while it has a lot of finance use cases, because I was actually around at Hyperion when it acquired Raza Solutions back in 2006, back at the beginning, I would like to say. It started in finance, but its use cases now span far out from finance, and any record that has a relationship, a hierarchy, and multiple properties across systems, EDM is the tool that allows you to do that. So with that context, let's go down to.
Hey, Chris, can I emphasize something that you said real quickly?
Sure, David, go ahead.
You talked about synchronizing data across the systems. If a given item has an attribute, right? We have found that even if you're all within the same cloud environment, different business users, different business environments will use these structures in a slightly different way. And so one group may need attribution that's different than another group, despite them all being in the same system. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the examples, I'll go back to the beginning of my career in 2002. I started my career in M&A, and we bought about 3 companies over in Europe. And the CFO told me, Chris, you're not the deals guy anymore. You're the post-merger integration guy now. And he said, I have a simple question. We bought 3 companies. What's our combined market share within one segment? And it seems like a pretty easy question, right? Go out, find out what our sales were in that segment, who our customers are. How does that compare to the total share of the market? Well, when we went out and we pulled the data together from the systems and we did the analysis, and I went back to the CFO and I said, our largest market is other. And he goes, other? I'm like, yeah, we should go to the other trade show, and we need to figure out how we can get more penetration into the other industry, magazines. And he goes, how is other the other? That's our biggest market. I said, well, when we went back to the original systems, it was a free text field to code our customers to the market that they were in. And the customer service reps it was the easiest thing for them to enter other or XXX or NA. And so only 5% of our customers are actually coded to a market that they're in. So EDM, if it had been available back then, would have been a huge saver to us, because it was helped synchronize these systems and to get the idea of what our market was. So that's an idea or a use case that David said, the financial or the sales system had one coding for customers, but when it got to the financial system, that data did not translate. There's 6 key things that as we go through today that I think are really important for you to remember. To relate back to what I just said, EDM is a repository for records, relationships, and properties of hierarchies. That's thing number one. Number two is EDM maps, manages, and synchronizes metadata, but not data between systems. So EDM helps us keep track of the structures, but does not move. It's not a replacement for Informatica or ab initio or any other data movement system, but it amplifies and extends the value of those integrations by making them more accurate, agile, automated, and accountable, which I'm going to come to in a little bit here. So that's the second point. Number three, EDM allows you to manage primary and alternate hierarchies across systems. So that primary roll-up of the chart of accounts, for example, of the account for income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, et cetera. But that account structure is used in many, many different ways across different systems. And the roll-up, whether it be a management roll-up versus the legal entity roll-up, those alternates also need to be managed. And when I insert or create a new record, it allows me to decide where that hierarchy needs to go in every other alternate hierarchy so that my reporting automatically reflects that. Number four, EDM can be a system of record or of reference for hierarchies in your system. That previous slide that I showed, EDM was actually a system of reference. It took what was system A, was the system of record, and it propagated those hierarchies to every other subscribing system as a system of reference. EDM can also be the originator or the system of record, which every other system then pulls and subscribes to whatever EDM has a system of truth or the record of truth. So EDM, again, acts as a system of record or reference in your system, very important. As David said, that start anywhere approach, I don't have to say, oh, well, I've got to put everything in EDM from the beginning. I could put one hierarchy, I could attach it to the system of record and propagate it from day one very easily and build upon that foundation. Number five, EDM allows you to experiment and perform what-if analysis on your hierarchies. So you could create a hierarchy, map it out, load it to a reporting system, and load the data afterwards and do reporting on it without ever changing the source system. So I could take those hierarchies, create an alternate, load it to a reporting system, and do what-if analysis with data without ever having to go back and change the original system, unless I wanted to. So that what-if ability, the ability to perform and experiment on what those hierarchies would look like. What would a management hierarchy look like if we moved product A from, Bob to Jim? What would that look like if we changed these territories and the sales over the last 3 years? Does that support, what we're trying to do? It allows you to experiment very easily to get those answers. And finally, EDM keeps a history of hierarchies and changes over time. This is also important. So what if you wanted to go look at, you were doing a Cloud ERP transformation, and you wanted to go back and look at what is under my new system, what would the roll-ups look like under my old system? Kind of a reverse conversion, right? We converted all the data, we have the old system and the new system structure, but what if I wanted to look at the new system under the old system? What if I wanted to do year-over-year comparison before I have all the new data in my system? That's really hard to do under traditional approaches. With EDM, I have a record of what my old system looked like last year. Now I keep updates over time, so I can always go back and look at, well, the management reporting last year, remember we had product A under Bob, and under this year it's under Jim. So if I do a year-over-year comparison, it's very hard for me to do that if I move all the history when I do that. EDM allows me to do snapshots and keep a record over time, which is really important as well for your master data management strategy. You can see how it's evolving. And sometimes, it's interesting with EDM, sometimes what I've seen is, everything's new just like it was before, which is, hey, we just went back to the hierarchy that we had 3 years ago. Remember, we had that before. Now 3 years from now, we just went back to that one. So again, that history and changes over time, critical. So these are 6 key things that I'll kind of come back to as we go through the rest of the presentation. So let's talk about what the A4 model is. The A4 model for EDM, and the reason we call this the bridge to tomorrow is to David's point, metadata is the foundation for the use of data. More data has been created. I think there was some statistic. More data has been created in the last month than in all of human history combined prior to that. Like that's an amazing statistic, right? More data last month was created than all of human combined in the prior month. Like it's growing, at a exponential or hexadecimal growth rate. Well, having the underlying metadata structures and the ability to manage that is the key to that data. And most organizations have more data than they've ever had. And in a lot of cases, less information and even less insight than what they've had previously, because it's like the poem, the tale of the ancient mariner, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. These 4 key elements for your master data are really critical and key to you using your data and using that asset effectively. Data accuracy. If your data is not accurate and no one trusts it, all that time spending verifying and validating data by people to make sure that it's right, or comparing versions of the truth, whose version of the truth is more accurate, just, it can suck the life out of decision-making or the timeliness for sure. But having accurate data is the very first and key step. Being agile, or the velocity of data set, right? David said everyone's checking this data all the time and fixing it. Well, that really slows down the velocity of your data. If I wanted to move one cost center to another department, model that out, see what it would look like, and ensure that it reported accurately across every system that used that hierarchy. Without EDM, that's a time-consuming process, and sometimes is never actually completed and accurate. With EDM, maybe an hour later, I can give you answers to those questions. Data automation. We've heard a lot about robotic process automation, but what about just process automation or automating integrations? Automating the use of data requires a very strong or solid foundation in reference data that can be used by those automations in different ways, and can make sure that your automations are accurate and agile up to that. This is a build-up, if you will. And finally, that last piece, data accountability. So if I want to create a new cost center, how do I ensure that when I create a new cost center, that it has the properties, the attributes, that it sits in the right place in the system that I'm creating it, and that every other subscribing, whether that's a secondary or tertiary use, also has the same information, is rolled up accurately. And EDM is one of the few or only tools out in the market today that allows you to manage your ecosystem and to have accountability for, I can see who the submitter of this new cost center was, how it was routed. It was approved by their manager. It went to the controller who reviewed it, and we agree that there's a good business case for this. We approved it. The technical people ensured that every subscribing system had the right properties and attribution, and that it was loaded, and that the systems that use that information were right from day one when we created that cost center. So that proactive versus reactive way of managing your metadata is key. And these 4 elements, we think, lay the foundation for that. Well, what does that really mean then? So data accuracy with enterprise data management. Data accuracy is not just the report that you get. Usually EDM, a lot of initiatives that I've been involved in have started in the analytics or the reporting side, because it's like, well, how do we know this report is correct? Well, let's trace it back. And reporting's a little bit like getting water out of your sink. That report at the end is the Moen faucet that you have. It might look great, but again, if it's not accurate, it really doesn't matter what's coming out. We need to trace it back. We need to look at, how is that data curated? Where did the report pull it from? Did that data, was that the source or the origin? Well, no, it's a data warehouse. So the origin was actually the ERP system. Well, how is it connected? When was the last time it was loaded? Do we have a definition of that data? Is it cataloged and categorized accurately and in a way that we can manage that? And then all the way back to the creation was the definition of how it was created. That example that I gave at the beginning, when someone created a new customer, they did not map that customer up to a parent. They did not assign the market to that customer. So now this downstream of, hey, give me our market share for our combined entities across this organization becomes a really hard problem to solve because the answer at the end wasn't solved at the beginning. EDM helps you start solving these problems at the very beginning so that they're right at the end. Start with the end in mind is one way to think about it. So create and populate your source system. Make sure that EDM, whether the system of record or reference, is keeping a catalog of that then. The data connections are referencing EDM as they're loading data, so there's no kickouts or there's much fewer kickouts based on referential integrity of your systems. The data systems that are curating it, whether it's your administrative data warehouse, enterprise data warehouse, or any other subscribing system, is getting the most accurate version of those hierarchies. And then the reports that are coming out of there can always go back, and I know what the primary alternate hierarchy or the roll-up that we're using to manage the business. We can all be on the same page that we're using the same one. So let's talk about data agility. How many versions of the truth does your organization have? You could have system overlap. So when systems have the same data, but organize it differently, primary and alternate rollups. Use case overlap, when people use the same data in different ways. Well, I only use this part of it and look at it from this perspective. Oh, well, I use it this way. Or do we get the same answer from our overlap? Artifact overlap. Sometimes data is manipulated or modified differently as it's going through that accurate process, right? Whether it's cataloged, connected, how it's curated. These systems have different attributes and properties that can affect how that data is. Without EDM, it's very hard to keep all of that in sync. So your artifacts, the ones that are listed over the right, could be use very different definitions, and you can get different versions of the truth. EDM reduces the latency across your ecosystem by improving the speed that the data is managed, so reporting can be modified and manipulated in a way that provides consistent answers regardless of the source. And it doesn't just mean financial data. So down below, it could be accounting, finance, supply chain, contract management, procurement. Some of the best use cases that I have seen for EDM have actually been in the human capital management space around job codes or job families and roll-ups there. Managing pay bands. I've seen people have pay bands for those job codes managed in EDM, but different systems, whether it's the budgeting system that's using it, whether it's the HR system for payroll, sales, whether certain clients or campaigns or how they're managed. Again, EDM is not just a financial hierarchy management system, although there's some very powerful use cases there. It really has, a scalability across your enterprise to keep your whole ecosystem in play. And then, of course, all of the analytic use cases there and that end use case are optimized or improved by the use of EDM across those accurate 5 levers that I gave. So let's talk about data automation. So data automation is more than just creating an integration or automating your integrations or error handling, although that's important. Any automation can use the information that's in EDM as that foundation. So it enables your automations to scale by providing those properties and definitions of data that are reusable across automations. Hey, I want to have a roll-up of a budget variance. I want to automate a budget variance report, but that report, I don't want to create 5 reports. I just want to use a certain hierarchy that's managed differently across these 5 business units, but it needs to be automated and deliver this report to someone on the 5th day of the month. Well, I can create a process, a task, or a subtask that applies the specific hierarchy, then runs the variance report and sends it out. I could also have a hierarchy that also manages who gets the report. So, it's Bob and his 3 direct reports that sit under him need to have this reporting hierarchy that also then picks up the attributes, which might be the emails or the properties of those people, puts them in the email and sends it out. So there's a lot of different ways that automations can use EDM, whether it's in maintenance, ideation, development, testing. All those different elements have the ability to be enhanced by the use of EDM. And last but not least, data accountability. So it improves enhanced coordination with operational benefits like transition to a centralized hierarchy catalog, which EDM provides. Hey, I need a hierarchy. Did you get it from EDM? No, I made it on my own. Well, how many people use that? Well, I don't know, maybe there's 20 people, different reports that use it. Well, why don't we put it in EDM and now just reference it on those reports, right? It allows you to scale up, but also understand who created the hierarchy, who owns it, who has ownership of that hierarchy and maintains it over time. It has increased transparency, explainability, and confidence. So the workflow, in DRM, we used to have to build workflow governance. EP or EDM now in the cloud has built-in workflow that allows us to really amplify and extend the value of your data governance program. So if you have business stewards, technical stewards, that whole workflow and the ability to have business people approve things, approve the why and the what, and then have technical people put in the how and ensure that it's connected across your system. EDM really provides that value, and particularly giving stakeholders across your organization the ability to submit requests that then are curated by the appropriate people within the workflow, or given feedback. Hey, we didn't approve your new account, and here's why. You should use this, and it looks like this. You can take action confidently because you know that EDM is not only managing the workflow across individuals, but across systems. So it's going to the owner of that system, whether it's a system steward, to ensure that they're populating the information accurately in a timely manner, and that everyone's on the same page. So data accountability and governance, this is a key part of not just putting the data in and running it out, but putting a way that enables your data governance structure to be enabled in a more efficient and effective way. So let's talk about a couple specific use cases that we've seen. These are high impact use cases. So some of you may be on the cloud yet, some of you may not be on the cloud, depending on the system. It could be HCM, it could be CRM, it could be ERP for finance and supply chain. Pick your flavor of cloud that you want. We like to say that starting your cloud journey doesn't begin the day that you start your project. 18 to 24 months out, you can start looking, and if you have EDM, using this tool, regardless of what system you want, again, system agnostic, to start paving the way to be ready for cloud. So what's your strategy for cloud? Let's map your current state chart of accounts into EDM. You may determine what processes, or again, inventory of applications and systems. So now I'm pulling properties from, hey, what properties are we going to need? How does system B and C use the properties from our ERP system today? Let's start mapping those in. And now we are starting to get an inventory of what our ecosystem looks like. Develop a resource plan and backfill strategy and identify key leadership. So how are you going to do your data governance? If you don't have a data governance strategy today, when you're looking at going to the cloud, you can use that as a catalyst to set one up and use EDM to enable it. So looking at how you're now what your strategy for cloud is, but how are you going to organize for cloud in different ways? What's your architecture for cloud? You can do a fit gap and a plan for your metadata management. Hey, this system had 3 properties. My new system has 15, right, that I need to manage or I want to look at. How are we going to manage that in our new environment? How are we going to get back to basics on our reporting? And where are we going to put the different reports? What does that look like? And then finally, readiness for cloud. Look at your future state COA segments. What if your new system has 3 ways of looking at a system, like entity, cost center, account, location, 4 ways maybe, versus, hey, we put that all into one element right now in our current system. That's all a concatenated string. Well, if we're going to break that out, what does that look like? What if we modeled that out? What if we moved different structures within our current chart? You can do that all before you even pick a different ERP system or CRM system or HCM system. You can start modeling out what some of those what ifs might look like with some basic information from your new system. And then when you actually do the system and start the project, now your data conversion, your data integration, all that mapping, you've kind of done that work in advance. You can reduce the cost. You have a way of managing it for the future, but you've planned for it now, and your team is more connected with it than having to come up to speed during the project because you started a year and a half or 2 years ahead of time, getting this all in place so that when you do it, you're ready to execute. The last use case here that I'll put out is, so you picked an ERP system for an example, and you're starting. Well, EDM can really enhance or add value during the project, not just at the end. EDM is not a, hey, we're live, now we're getting EDM and we're getting all those benefits that David called. Well, during the project itself, EDM, as I just mentioned, can help you with your mapping. It can help you with the properties and understand what our ecosystem is going to look like. It can help you put things in place like governance and how things will get approved. It'll improve transparency. So, hey, finance is making a change. Let's alert IT, let's alert HR, let's alert supply chain, depending on what those changes are. Let's start looking at how EDM might work in the future with just even the data governance of the workflow. We can start doing that now. And while we're making those changes, we can start using that to great effect. It reduces rework. So if I make changes during the build, I can move that around. And if I'm using EDM, you know, either my gold system or whatever versions I'm having can just start picking up the latest version of the hierarchies and putting those in place. And now, you know, that's flowing through the testing. I'm not making manual changes. I'm not going back and adjusting my conversion. You know, I can start making those changes in a much more transparent and agile way, as I mentioned previously. Testing. So when it's time to make sure that all this is rolling up and everything's tested and accurate, right, I can use that actually as a, hey, I want to look at what my old system looked like under my new system. It really enhances the conversion strategy. It helps with testing to make sure the data has been verified and validated, and really puts you on a firm foundation for go live, which is your ability to sustain and maintain these changes. Sometimes what we'll see without EDM is, while it's possible to go live and manage everything without EDM, EDM really enhances, as David said, the ability of your organization to sustain and maintain the solution long-term. Any changes you want to make, the process is in place, the governance is in place. You know, it puts those structures in place that allows your organization to be agile, accurate, put in automations, and be accountable during the implementation, so that when you go live, that muscle memory is there to a large degree, and you're not learning it right from scratch. So I want to thank you for all of your time today. I think we do have about 10 minutes left for Q&A. So David, back over to you.
Great, thank you. I've noticed as we went along that a bunch of questions were asked for in the Q&A section. Those will be published out with the video when we post it. If there's any other questions, go ahead and let me get the Q&A to show up here. Here we go.
David,
okay.
David,
Yes.
one of the questions was, is the idea that EDM establishes a framework for data to which all other IT applications or solutions must in some fashion conform?
I'll let Chris expand on that. I think it's the only issue I have. I would answer that yes, except for the must part.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutes are always hard, right?
Yeah,
Like
no, not everything. Not all other systems don't have to conform. EDM's role is to ensure that those that are subscribing do conform. Chris, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that reporting hierarchies are a great example. So there are standard reports that use certain hierarchies that are a standard definition: the legal entity roll-up, the tax roll-up, those types of roll-ups are standard ones. There could be different management roll-ups that, if I want to standardize that management roll-up, I could put it in EDM, but I can still do ad hoc roll-ups. And if multiple people like that report, then an ad hoc roll-up may become a standard roll-up that's used and scaled across the enterprise because it's a good way of looking at that. Or, hey, I have a new system. I just found out we have all these hierarchies here. Can I use that? Can you put the properties and add that? So over time, again, you can scale up EDM to encompass that, but you choose what subscribes. There was another question in the QA that I'll just grab now. So
Perfect.
we
Great.
call it a publish subscribe model, pub sub. So one of the ways that EDM works is you keep EDM and it publishes out in a structure that has the parent-child relationship of all these hierarchies with the attributes and properties to a table in a relational database. Those systems that want to subscribe to the different hierarchies can just pull that from that relational table. That's one way that this works. So you can either push it with an automation of, hey, I want to load this and make it a push, or you can say the subscribing system can choose when to quote pull and update on whatever basis, usually overnight is what we've seen a lot of these done sort of daily. You get a refresh of these, usually not more than that, but you could do a manual push where you updated it, in the middle of a day. But yes, that works. But it's really what you choose to conform to this, and then it's sort of automagical once you hook it up.
Excellent. Yeah, and just on that the first question, let me add another part. When we talk about that all of the other IT systems must conform, EDM has a great alternate and what if hierarchy capability. So I can do a lot of what ifing that no system has to conform to, right, until it's released. So if I'm going into a reorg, let's say I've got a new fiscal year coming, we're going to do a reorg. We're going to change a bunch of things. I can build that entire model out in EDM. I can even test it before I push it live. And you can also schedule to build on what Chris said, what is this subscribing system? EDM uses an application adapter paradigm, which means many applications that have pre-built adapters, most of the Oracle applications and a few third-party applications, we know a lot. That adapter knows how that application consumes the changes to the data and the such. And you have the power to decide, let's say a change is approved and I'm going to push it into GL, okay? Yet we have a policy that says no GL changes within 3 weeks of closing the books. Well, EDM is aware of that, right? You put that policy in so that it knows. So if somebody makes a change the day before, quarter end, and we're getting ready to start closing the books, it's not going to push it right then because that's the policy. So just to add a little bit to that question.
There was another question of, can I choose which parts to subscribe to? So there's two ways to do that. One, you could I'll give you an example. So in a lot of my clients, it's used around projects. We use EDM pretty extensively. So you might use the enterprise performance management system to create capital project requests. So you're creating capital projects, but not all those requests are approved. So at the end, only the projects that go into an approved status on this date are picked up and sent over to the ERP system for the the PPM module within Oracle, for example. And so you're only loading the approved projects. You're not loading every project that was requested. You're only loading the approved ones. Now it can be bi-directional too. So there's certain things, for example, the project number is not assigned in EPM. It's only assigned in the projects and module and ERP. Well, once that projects are loaded and they're created right in the ERP system, now it becomes bi-directional, and there's a field in the EPM system that gets the project number loaded back from the ERP system. So it's not just a single directional model. EDM can actually be bi-directional for certain use cases where different workflow may occur in different systems, but it keeps them both in sync. Right now, once that's done, step one is load this. Step two is load this. Step three is sync up any changes that have been made, and you can keep both systems coordinated.
Exactly, because you can have when you talk about master data, there's system of record and there's golden record. And EDM handles, it doesn't have to be the system. Many organizations, GL is the system of record for the chart of accounts. In that case, and that's policy, right? EDM wouldn't be the system of record, but it would be where you managed it, changed it, et cetera.
It's the system of reference,
It's the
right?
system,
In that point.
yes.
Yep.
At that point. Excellent. Okay. Well, I think we're to the end of our questions for now. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance. We appreciate it, and we hope everybody got some valuable information out of this webcast. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.